The Summer I Will Never Forget. Copyright Sergey Kukanov, 2025. Chapter 1. It was the hottest day I've ever experienced in my life. I covered my head with a cap and sought shade under our old cherry tree, looking for some protection from the unbearable sun. My beloved grandma was going about her daily activities, watering beds in a vegetable garden, and giving orders to my grandpa, who was already overwhelmed enough by this super sunny day. No way, I'm off. I think I've ordered enough beds, haven't I? His forehead was covered with tiny drops of sweat, and he seemed about to resign himself from such an ungrateful task. Hold on, there are 2 more beds that need ordering, my grandmother pointed out to him. As a child, I was mesmerized watching her work. Is there anything I can assist you with, Grandma? My lazy question sounded more like a request to be excused from helping altogether. Yes, please, sweetheart, but it seems to me that you're feeling hungry, aren't you? Anyway, you can go into the house and look for a snack if you want. Help yourself. After saying this, she returned to her recent occupation, cuddling with my grandpa, piling him with as many tasks as possible. I've never understood why she seemed to take care of her grandson more than her own husband. I entered the house spontaneously, looking for the first thing that could have pretended to be a snack. I've never understood why my grandma was so reserved with her feelings towards my grandpa. Since we got a little garden in the country, she has become more obsessed with planting more flowers and trees in it and less tender with grandpa. Or maybe it only seemed that way to me. Certainly she was not. According to my childish perception of such a huge and unexplainable world, everything that has happened in a dacha these days reminded me of how many things I still have to learn, and made me realize not to take my own suspicions about my grandparents too seriously. A long time ago, my grandma used to read her garden books all the time when she was indoors, but since we got this countryside garden, things have started to get worse. She stopped reading me her night fairy tales and preferred to stay outside until midnight, just watering the garden beds and looking after her peonies as if they were her own children. I also knew that she was in absolute love with her small babies, what she used to call her flowers. She also adored roses and chrysanthemums, which were her favorites. As it turned out, she spent every single summer in her, as she used to call it, paradise possessions, taking full advantage of nature, which was her only remedy to feel better. We almost managed to complete our garden endeavors, and I was sitting next to my grandpa, sniffing the air like a curious puppy, trying to catch every single smell of our neighbor's barbecue spreading around. Listen, I turned to my grandpa, hugging him for his warm shoulders and looking into his blue eyes. That reminded me of a clear sky with no clouds. What is the matter, my boy? My grandpa asked, giving me a hug in return, remaining silent. Nothing, I said, shifting my gaze from his eyes to the sunset, which had only just begun to show itself. Chapter 2. At sunrise, I loved listening to the earliest birds, whose sweet voices broke into our dacha like a cascade of green waterfalls, capturing our household in their possession. Then my grandpa's grunting signaled his willingness to stay in bed for 5 more minutes. After that, we planned to go out to the nearby forest to look for a dozen tasty and strong mushrooms in the fresh grass covered with falling dew. The grass looked unwavering, as if it had been watching its last dreams, and the quiet that tenderly flowed through the branches of the trees gently waking them up, filling the space with many magnificent flavors that captivated two strangers' attention who had just entered here, mesmerized, staring at this green loving fairy tale. Having our feelings mixed and not being able to clearly express exactly what we felt, my grandpa and I simply watched the morning birds' holiday, a time that was ready to make everyone who had already entered this place joyful, full of grace, and open to confess all their sins to the forest. Can you hear it? My grandpa asked, giving me a tender hug and groaning once more, just as he always did during moments that brought him much delight. What? I replied. All I hear are the birds jumping from one branch to another, trying to make as much impression as possible on us. No, you can't figure out what I'm about to say, he said. He pointed with his index finger toward a small blue patch of sky hanging between two large oak branches, which looked at us with a sunny smile, as if it were a crystal lake shimmering in the air. Splendid, isn't it? My grandpa nodded in surprise, refusing to believe the reality surrounding us since we arrived. To our delight, we also discovered two large mushrooms growing beneath our feet. We've just made 2 more friends here, he exclaimed joyfully, leaning with his pocket knife toward the warm-smelling ground to carefully cut the mushrooms by their roots. Then he placed the 2 lucky ones into his basket, which he held in his right hand. Done. Very well. Now we can move forward to discover more friends here. He looked entirely happy, as if in that moment he had been granted all for the treasures of the world. Chapter 3. Our countryside life seemed to us an endless miracle, strongly connected to our daily walks in the forest, visiting our beloved shore, swimming in the river, and sharing our happiness that only grew each day. My grandpa seemed to me a strong rock and open space that couldn't be moved by anyone, including my grandma. Every single morning, while I was still having my last dreams and trying to make those moments last a little longer, my grandpa was already on his feet, standing near the stove, mixing his beloved mushrooms with a spoon and whistling his favorite song melody, ta-ra-ra-ra-ra. Oh, my favorite dark cherry scarf. At these moments, the whole dacha was filled with the forest flavors wafting into our house. It was an incredible, breathtaking summer story that embraced us with its sunny arms. We were completely immersed in this friendly atmosphere, dreaming that it would last forever. My grandma, the best hostess in the world, looked after us as if we were two newborn babies, unable to take care of ourselves. What a mess. Look at this. The same words echoed in my ears every morning when my grandma would get angry about my grandpa's cooking. Clear this place immediately, or I'll throw your mushrooms away. Okay, I will. Please don't be so noisy, or you might wake Sergey. My grandpa was trying to protect, and at that moment, he didn't seem to me like the sturdy rock I had seen him as before. All my previous expectations of his unquestionable greatness were instantly shattered the moment she said it. The legends of his stoicism that had captivated my mind before were destroyed in an instant. I've already gotten up. No worries, I said as I entered the kitchen, first hugging my grandma, then my grandpa, before checking our morning menu. A fresh portion of mushroom seemed to me the perfect way to start my morning and to be filled with enough energy for the whole day. So, pour the water into the washstand and wash your hands, then we'll start breakfast, said Grandpa. I immediately ran outside. A washstand was right there to happily greet a new day. There was a little dog following my grandpa's footsteps every time he walked around our neighborhood. At that moment, my grandpa seemed to me like a person walking among his possessions. This little dog might scare all the local cats hunting for mice as she barked at any shadow she encountered. We called her tenderly our little guard for her sincere loyalty demonstrated through her unwavering devotion to my grandpa, whom she regarded as her only friend in the whole world. She used to keep us good company all the way since the moment we came up against it. Her tiny, laughing eyes watched my grandpa absently, as if he were a great sailor standing at the steering wheel, guiding our pirate ship called Life across the Atlantic Ocean. Our days were passing calmly, serenity full of genuine happiness and joy. The green tree branches greeted us friendly, giving us a profound shade to keep us cool. Neither my grandpa nor I, nor even our little four-legged friend, knew what a great time we had just been all together in this awakening, fresh-smelling forest, like a lime tree in July. Each single path led us to new adventures through the thickets of wild bushes growing here and there, which kept their silence unless a stranger's foot came here. Suddenly, we came face to face with a little serpent that quickly crossed the path and looked scared upon seeing three strangers in front of it. Wow, is it poisoned? Exclaimed I, jumping backward and getting ready to flee. No, don't be scared of it. My grandpa held my hand. They don't bite. It's a grass snake. It can't harm you. Be sure that this little one gets scared of you too. He laughed. Oh, thank God, I exhaled and smiled. Actually, I'm not afraid of it at all. I tried to look brave in front of Grandpa. I know, you are my boy. He gently stroked my head. Chapter 5. At times, my little 9-year-old cousin joined us, and then we all enjoyed ourselves happily, including our little 4-legged friend, who followed our footsteps, accompanying us with its loud barking wherever we went. My cousin is called Lena, and she used to demand all my spare time for herself. Much to her delight, I was always nearby, ready to play, pick berries from our cherry trees to provide her with our local dessert. Then we usually went down to our neighborhood's dachas, picking and tasting cherries that hung down from their brightly painted fences. We also loved vying with each other to bombard our grandpa with all kinds of questions, watching his reaction and laughing out loud if our childish, nonsensical questions had an effect on him. Enough, kids. I've said enough. Everything has its limits, and my patience is not infinite. Grandpa used to say when the situation went out of control. And our 4-legged friend used to bark at us while standing by my grandpa's side, as if she were the smartest animal on planet Earth, understanding our human language and able to maintain eye contact with us. My cousin loved to invent stories on the go, where she saw us as characters coming out of video games or her dark, scary story for kids. To be honest, I've never understood her passion for such things, which seemed too weird and inappropriate for her age. Remembering the very first time she took up learning to swim, her attempts to prove herself in new studies simultaneously failed, and rather helpless rather than funny. First, she was dropped into the water like a screeching puppy, catching air by mouth and trying to hold herself on the water surface as long as possible. Try it again. She was constantly cheered on by our grandpa, standing nearby and laughing at her helpless movements as she tried to keep swimming, pretending to be a small fish in the ocean. The sun's glare illuminated the water like brilliant stars, swaying and reflecting in our happy eyes. Then we all lay down on the grass, gazing dreamily into the sky, listening to our grandpa's stories, which he seemed to invent on the spot. My cousin and I both admired his kindness and childish enthusiasm, which made him look even more like us when he told his stories. The nearby field was filled with spicy aromas that wafted around, taking our breath away with their authentic flavors that seemed to us like those of paradise. Chapter 6. The next morning, my grandma entrusted us 3 with watering the garden beds. My cousin grabbed her wooden can filled with water and hurried forward like a tank to the spot where I stood. The nearby bushes crackled loudly with her steps, which she pretended were the massive steps of a bear, though they certainly weren't her cousin's. Easy, you'll break them all that way, I protested, trying to explain to her that there's a better way to do it without damaging the plants. My grandma nodded approvingly at me, as if she agreed with my point of view rather than with my cousin's. We split up. I took for the beds near the fence under the scorching sun. Actually, it wasn't my idea, but my cousin's, to spot me there, while Lena wooded the beds from the shade of the apple tree, waving at me with a smile. Go on, I'm busy enjoying my apple. Would you like some? She said, dropping an apple core over the fence into her neighbor's yard. She did everything to test my patience. That's what I thought at the time. Feeling annoyed from doing nothing, she soon came up to me and conspiratorially smiled. "Let's water all the beds quickly and then go swimming," my cousin blurted out unexpectedly, plucking one waffle cherry from the tree. "Okay, you've won. Let's have a snack." The sun splashed its light everywhere, laughing out loud and painting freckles on my cousin's cheeks with its warm rays. We left our garden beds half watered and half scorched by the sun and entered the dacha to find something to eat, while our grandparents waved their heads and watered our abandoned beds. Chapter 7. Next morning, we had plans to go for a walk in the nearby forest and maybe find a dozen strong honey mushrooms. The weather had promised to be great, and all three of us felt excited about our little adventure. I took my backpack. My cousin brought her small bucket to collect some flowers. Grandpa looked at us attentively, checking that we were ready to go, and finally we left. The forest greeted us with its birds' songs wafting through all parts of the place. The morning dew shimmered here and there with various colors, inviting three strangers to discover this magnificent world. Finally, we found some hazel trees full of nuts hanging down heavily and promising us a great harvest to pick. "Wow, such a great moment, kids," exclaimed Grandpa. Rolling up his sleeves and getting ready to get to work, we started picking up the nuts, stuffing our pockets with them. In a few minutes, the hazel bush was nearly empty, and my cousin and I sat in the shade eating our nuts. Some of them tasted immature, and I spat them into the grass. "Don't spit on the grass, it's not a good habit," said Grandpa, whistling one of his favourite songs simultaneously. "Okay, I got it." I turned to my cousin, who's sitting and watching me conspiratorially. "What are you up to?" I asked her, sitting nearby. "Let's hide from Grandpa in the near bush." "No, I don't think that's a good idea," protested I. "Come on, just for 5 minutes, while Grandpa is getting busy looking for nuts." After a short persuasion, I agreed, and we hid in the bushes, patiently waiting for our grandpa's reaction. For the first 10 minutes, he seemingly could notice our absence, going on with whistling and enjoying his work, but very soon he decided to call me. "Sergey, come and see how many nuts I've got here." We didn't move and stayed silent. "Sergey, can you hear me? Sergey, Lena, where are you?" We still remained quiet, but I started feeling bad about our silly idea to hide here in these thorny bushes. My cousin, however, remained curious and intrigued in the next few seconds. Our grandpa's face completely changed, looking paler. He drooped the basket on the ground and dashed back and forth, trying to find us. He looked really frightened and lost at the same time. I couldn't stay quiet any longer, and although my cousin was angry about my decision to show ourselves, I raised my head first. "We are here, Grandpa. We just played." I rushed towards him, and my cousin followed. "Thank God," that's all Grandpa could say, hugging us with tears in his eyes. "I thought I had already lost you." I'd never seen my grandpa cry before. Chapter 8. It rained heavily the whole day, and my cousin and me had no idea what kind of things we could amuse ourselves with. I was hanging around back and forth trying to invent a breathtaking short story to amuse Alina, who was sitting in the porch watching the big drops of rain falling down heavily and smashing their fragile bodies about the near stand apple tree's leaves. Such a boring day, isn't it? She yawned lazily and began drumming her index finger on the porch pillar, trying to distract herself from the rainy weather that seemed like it would never end for the whole day. Great! I think I'd rather sleep than sit here listening to this noise. She suddenly stood up and went back inside, searching for some kind of amusement. I stayed on the porch gazing at an apple tree, which to me looked like a beautiful princess full of tears. Our grandparents had already woken up and returned to their daily routines. Grandma was cuddling with Grandpa as usual, pointing out the numerous things he had been tasked with doing. Hurry up! Have you managed to put the bucket out to collect the rainy water? This water will come in handy for my little plants. Hopefully tomorrow won't be rainy, so we can gather enough of this living water. I want all our buckets to be filled. She tied her scarf as she usually did and went outside, brave against the crazy rain. Grandma, you can get cold out there, I yelled, but she didn't hear me. I returned inside the dacha and lay down on my bed, whistling one of my favorite songs. I did it mostly with mixed feelings about what the coming day might bring. Don't whistle, I don't like it. Besides, you won't make any money doing that, Lena said, looking at me angrily and yawning twice. Is it just boring? Who told you that whistling can make you pull? I tried to be clear with my cousin. She often expressed her insights in the wrong way. Guys, breakfast is ready. If you don't hurry, it'll get cold. Grandpa's voice called from the doorway, inviting us to join him in the kitchen. And what about Grandma? I asked. Will she join us? I think she's already eaten, he replied. She couldn't wait to get back to tending all the plants in her garden. Then he placed a steaming frying pan filled with a dozen honey mushrooms on the table, covered with a flower-printed tablecloth. The aroma was delicious, making us even hungrier as it carried all the rich flavors of the forest. Chapter 9. The sunset was breathtaking, and we sat mesmerized, gazing attractively at the last rays of the sun touching our porch and the nearby apple tree. My grandparents were sitting shoulder to shoulder, discussing their morning plans and trying to fill as many waterbeds as possible within the next 2 hours. My cousin and I remained indifferent to the task. As we had our own plans to go swimming and then return to reading a captivating book that we started last night. The bees were buzzing around, making us pay attention to them. Oh, come on. Are you not going to sting me, baby? Are you? My grandpa waved away our yellow guests and their insistent buzzing, then turned back to Grandma to continue the conversation. I've learned enough to swim, so I bet I can beat you in a competition, my cousin said, clearly overestimating her swimming skills, but I didn't mind. I turned my apple core over and threw it over the fence. So what was the outcome of that pioneer boy? I asked Lena dully. not expecting to get any clear explanation from her. I guess he was supposed to be lost in that wild forest, and I don't care if he's alive the next morning. I've been more intrigued by the second storyline, where that pioneer boy's abandoned puppy is going to survive for the next 3 days without any food. And his cat, don't forget, he owned the cat too. I added, well, actually, they'll be okay if they find a way to get outside. Animals are smarter and more adaptable to this life than people. I've just been curious about one thing that didn't let me sleep well last night, I said sarcastically, looking at Lena. What thing? Her eyes were wide open for a surprise. Hope that these animals haven't eaten each other yet, having any pieces of food. I smiled ironically. Fool, don't say such things. Lena stood up and went back into the house. I stayed with my grandparents, listening carefully to their conversation and exposing my smiling face to the shining morning sun. What are you messing around for, Sergey? Let's go back to work. There are 20 more beds that need watering. My grandpa stood up and went to the barn to get all the necessary tools for me to perform my task. Great, Lena may do nothing while I'll work hard. Here. I took my watering can, filled it with water, and started watering while dully whistling one of my favorite songs. I was near the open window when I immediately heard my cousin's voice. Don't whistle, you'll have no money. Chapter 10. 3 days later, I accidentally twisted my ankle and had to stay indoors, amusing my cousin, who seemed to take too much delight in torturing me with her unbearable jokes. Now you're in bed, I can do whatever I want, and you can't control me anymore. Enjoy your time reading your boring book, she said. She left the room and went out to relax in our flourishing garden. I turned the page, trying to immerse myself back into the story of my beloved characters. Though my twisted ankle kept bringing me back to reality, my book was beautifully illustrated with captivating pictures and the story about two friends who fell in love with a capricious girl seemed to make her so happy. Watching the competition between the two for her heart, it reminded me of the mutual pleasure my cousin derived from watching me lie in my bed. I couldn't take it anymore and knew I had to try something to bring myself back to my usual activity. But how? Any attempt to stand up from my bed was thwarted by a piercing pain in my ankle. After a dozen tries, I hopelessly lay back down and exhaled deeply. The annoying fly had reached my nose and was preparing to attack. Not this time, honey, I muttered, trying to blow the persistent insect away, but instead of retreating, it only pursued me more incessantly. The sun was teasing me with its first glimmers dancing on the wall, drawing me like a sunny rabbit, hopping up and down like a shiny crystal ball. The weather was perfect for inspecting my unrotted garden beds and lending a hand to my grandparents. Their voices drifted in from outside, making me feel a bit useless that day. Great. I'm chained to my room now, reading this boring book. What a story, just about two silly fellows following a mermaid who's setting her nets for their hearts. Who exactly bought this book? My grandparents were never curious about such stories. They remained loyal to their garden beds and fruit plants. I closed the book, feeling sufficiently bored, and effortlessly drifted off to sleep. In my dream, I saw Lena dressed elegantly, jumping from one chamomile to another as if she were a little princess from an old forgotten fairy tale. As she hopped, I gradually felt my breath becoming shallower, my vision fading, and I hopelessly struggled for air. The very familiar voice I used to hear all the time seeped into my dream. Time to wake up. I suddenly opened my eyes, and guess who I saw? It was Lena, poking a chamomile into my nose in her numerous attempts to wake me. Chapter 11. The spring murmured calmly, running over the little stones engraved into the clayey soil. My grandpa put the bucket under the murmuring stream and sat down on the old bench, looking around pensively. The autumn is near. Look at those yellow leaves. They are about to fall down. It's all the same as what happens in our lives. Some are getting older, while others are just beginning a journey, like green, fresh plants, making their way through the sun. He took off his cap and put it on his knees. My cousin and I looked at him thoughtfully as well and remained quiet. We weren't interested in such great philosophy at that time. It seemed to us something that was said abstractly and didn't concern us at all. And why are you comparing us to green plants? My cousin protested unexpectedly. We are not those green ones. She leaned over the bucket full of water, trying to place the yellow leaf, which she had cut from a nearby birch, onto the water. The water was glistening in the sunshine, and everyone watching could see how clear it was. I looked at our grandpa. He had already stepped away from the bench and was making his way to the familiar oak tree to greet it. He used to spend 5 or 4 minutes nearby just embracing the tree and nourishing his body with its energy. It charged him with strength and positivity. Meanwhile, some leaves continued to fall, spinning around in the shiny, clear, and brilliant air. Chapter 12. The next morning, my grandma assigned us chores in the garden beds. The plants needed to be watered sufficiently. We ran around with watering buckets, bumping into each other along the way. Some buzzing bees followed us, cheering us up with their lively buzzing. Do you like playing as this yellow character? My cousin kept asking me about the video game she loved to play while we were in the city. He seemed so unbeatable and quick, she insisted, waiting eagerly for my answer. I don't care how powerful he is until we finish watering our beds. I said, trying not to pay attention to such silly questions. We kept working diligently, and within an hour the task was complete. The sun was scorching unmercifully, and we decided to hide on the porch. Lena took out her colouring book and a couple of pencils and started colouring. You know what? I began trying to amuse her with my new idea. I think I know how we can play your favorite video game right here. She turned to me, completely surprised, her eyes still bright with interest, eager to hear what I was going to say. But how is that supposed to work without a video console here? She stared at me as if I were an alien from another planet. Sharing my idea, bam bam, two pears fell from the tree, making us both stop and listen. Let's have some rest from your crazy ideas. I looked at her instantly, then stood up and made my way into our dacha. Hold on, listen to me carefully. She followed me patiently, which didn't seem familiar to me. She definitely plotted something very intriguing. An hour later, we sat on the floor, diligently drawing her favorite video game characters using only 3 broken, colorful pencils. She tried to make her characters look better than mine. Even here, she did her best pretending to be a great painter seeking admission and world fame. My dragon's tail looks brighter than yours, and my enchanted princess too. And I'm more experienced in drawing than you, she declared, even jumping up to admire her sudden masterpiece. My patience ran out, and I grew bored of her spontaneous remarks. Why don't you draw a different character, like a fox, for example? She stared at me dully, as if I were advising her to jump from the high bank into the cold river. What? Did I say something silly? I gazed at her, trying to figure out what made her lose her fun. Nothing. You always make me angry while I'm painting. She threw her album, stood up, and approached the door. I'm going out. Enjoy your loneliness. She slammed the door, and the last thing I managed to hear were her quick steps down the porch. Chapter 13. The fall was near and the leaves were turning yellow, changing their colours to more shining and bright tones, illuminating the air. My cousin and I stood next to the birch, which seemed to be cuddling with the wind, its branches crawling across the blue sky. At that moment, it was supposed to look like a drunk woman waving her hands, regretting her past. We followed the path as it changed directions repeatedly. At one point, we got scared, thinking we might be lost. Lena looked at me with panic in her eyes. What are we going to do next? How will we get out of here? Any ideas? Her face turned red, and I started to feel nervous too. Okay, don't panic. I know we're out of the right direction, but the sun is still up, and that means we'll keep following it until we reach the exit from this dark forest. I encouraged her to think positively, just like my grandpa always taught me. Just follow me and I'll show you the way out. That was the only words I managed to say, I guess. Even my cousin had got used to giving orders here, but she had to submit to my will because I was older and consequently or experienced at finding quick solutions in extreme situations like this. The thorny bushes cracked, and suddenly my cousin's face turned pale. Snake! Snake! She shouted, jumping off the spot as fast as she could. Come on, it's just a grass snake, I giggled. They're not dangerous at all. You don't have to jump each time you see one, dear. Lena cast her scornful gaze in my direction and fell silent. We both remained quiet for a while, thinking about how to get out of here before nightfall when our grandparents would start looking for us. The more we searched for the right path, the more our hesitation grew. So, we followed the last glimmers of the setting sun, trying to discover the promised trail that would lead us back home. Nice. I think the path is supposed to be our last resort, isn't it? Lena put her right hand in her pocket and pulled out a sweet candy. Where's my share? I asked her. It's not enough for myself, I guess. Now I'm going to enjoy this while you look for the right direction. At that moment, she didn't seem as scary to me as she had a minute before. She settled on a nearby stump, unwrapped the candy, and put it into her mouth, beginning to suck on it. Mmm, delicious. I guess you like it that much, huh? I leaned against the nearby oak tree trunk and remained silent. Less than anything, I didn't want to argue or try to prove my point to anyone at that moment. Sergey, Lena, a familiar voice called out, echoing through the woods. Are you there? Grandpa? We both shouted in unison, then dashed towards the source of the familiar voice. Our feet seemed to lift us off the ground, so happy we felt in that moment. Our sudden joy was so overwhelming that it seemed to make the whole world pause and contemplate it. We both ran up to him, giving him a double hug simultaneously. Grandpa's cheeks were filled with tears. Finally, I thought I'd lost you forever, he said, often speaking like this when overwhelmed or nervous. He embraced us as tightly as he could, and despite his outward appearance, it was clear that he had endured many difficult times, bad expectations he had managed to outlive, until he finally got us back. Oh my gosh, kids, you really scared me with your silly games. Was it Lena's idea for you both to get lost in the woods? I guess it was hers. He looked at my cousin incredulously and waved his hand. She stared at him defensively, innocent as ever, not understanding why all the shame for this little tricky game was going to be on her. Come on, I guess Grandma can't wait to see you both alive. When we got home, there was a generous portion of honey mushrooms placed on the bright tablecloth, steaming softly and filling the room with their aroma. Chapter 14. The fall was near, and each of its blows was approaching our garden, making the leaves more yellow and trembling. Since the morning, my grandpa's loyal dog had stayed beside the porch, barking at the wind. That day, she seemed less lively than usual. My grandma spotted her beloved garden beds and wooded them carefully. Lena put on her headphones and was fully immersed in her music, dancing on to the rhythm. She used to dance with her small cassette player in her hands for doing nothing else. My grandpa felt sad too. It seemed like the whole world was upset about the arrival of this sudden fall. Later, it started raining, and we all gathered on our porch, carefully listening to the sound of the rain. It's going to be longer than I expected, murmured Grandpa, taking off his cap. He always seemed thoughtful in those moments. His eyes often appeared transparent, as if they reflected the whole sky from within. He embraced me and fixed his gaze on a nearby apple tree. This apple tree looks miraculous, doesn't it? I guess our bed watering has been successfully postponed for a better time, he said, then turned back to me. Sergey, let's play. Lena just stopped dancing and approached me. Her eyes lit up with interest and she smiled. Let's play hide and seek, she blurted out instantly. No thanks. There's no place to hide except in the attic. I objected, feeling a bit annoyed. Besides, our grandma wouldn't be pleased with that kind of game, would she? I guess you're right. Lena left the porch and went into the dartshire. She used to show me if she wasn't in the mood. I continued watching the rain. Don't leave her alone, Grandpa advised me. And in the meantime, I'll give a hand to your grandma. Okay, I will, I said, standing up and entering the dartshire. Lena was sitting with her feet on the bed, reading her book, seemingly not paying any attention to me. She appeared to be a bit angry with me, but still, I held on to the hope that we might share common interests to discuss. Are you reading the same book yesterday? I asked, trying to smooth over my earlier ignorance and reach out to her. What? She looked at me indifferently. What do you want? I felt confused, struggling to find the right words to rebuild our recent broken friendship. Nothing. How about we play hide and seek? She suddenly jumped up and her eyes lit up again. Great. When do we start? Now, I replied, smiling, feeling happy and eager to play. We were standing at the bus stop waiting for a bus to get back home. The last days of summer felt especially sad and brilliant, filled with transparent air and yellow leaves that fell from their branches, making their last reverences in their beautiful vaults. There were several cottages waiting for the last bus. It always tended to be late, which made us, all of us, standing there nervous. From time to time, some of them were looking at their baskets and backpacks, as if checking that all their fruits and mushrooms were in their places. My grandpa was engaged in a conversation with his neighbour, discussing the latest news he had listened to on the radio, while our grandma happily talked with another old lady about some garden issues. Everyone looked happy. Lena and I stood up quietly contemplating this mesmerizing scene. Finally, the battered old bus appeared on the horizon, mooing and wobbling from side to side like an old bear after winter hibernation. As the bus reached the stop, and the door swung open with a clang, the most prominent cottagers dashed forward, eager to storm the bus and claim better seats near the window. We squeezed in carefully, trying not to squash our freshly gathered fruits. The doors closed and the bus moved forward. The old and familiar forest, which had already begun turning yellow, brushed past the window. My grandparents managed to find their seats and, holding each other's hands, kept talking about something very important, something only they knew. My cousin was holding a handrail, feeling sad that she hadn't managed to find a seat for herself. I was thinking about how quickly time had passed, taking the summer sun away from us. Yes, time was passing by, and the melody of happy days was filling my ears more and more intensely. I began to think that our old bus was suddenly lifting off the ground, soaring above the yellow forest, higher and higher. Where to? the interior of the bus started filling with a blue hue, as if we were about to land in a vast, clear ocean teeming with countless small and enormous fishes. Suddenly, it began to rain heavily. As only the sky could pour down, the raindrops flooded the interior, and all the passengers started to drown in the sky's cry. I dashed towards my grandparents, trying to save them, while tightly holding my cousin's hand in mine, making our way forward through the chaos. "Grandpa, Grandma, we're here!" I cried out, trying to make them see us, but instead of their faces, 200 raindrops responded in reply. I felt my face be covered with these drops, as if I were crying over my helplessness in the face of the universal flood. Then I saw the trees, which normally stood shrinking into tiny wooden toys in my hands, like little figurines. A Dacia was also right there, nestled in my palm, along with our little dog running after the bus in midair. The Volga River seemed to be behind the window, getting closer and closer, trying to embrace this chaos. Suddenly, the front door opened and our grandparents, holding each other's hands, stepped off the bus, managing to wave us goodbye with their hands. I refused to believe what I was seeing, but the leaves from those tiny wooden trees kept swirling and filling the bus with their dance, while the raindrops only strengthened their streams. What is going on? I opened my eyes. They were filled with tears. Even my cushion was wet. That was a sunny morning outside. I knew I had to call my cousin Lena and tell her about my dream. Sharing this strange and vivid journey with her, as if her voice could make sense of the chaos inside my mind. Unfortunately, I couldn't share this dream with my grandparents. I hope they are still happily married somewhere in heaven, watching over us with their gentle love. The Path to Self, Part 1. There is a place waiting for you. Chapter 1. Karen was sitting on the garden bench, gazing at the flying butterfly jumping from one flower to another, trying to concentrate on the sunniest day that entered her heart by bringing joy and the soft melodies of the forest. Nearby, a cat was staring at her from time to time, waving its fluffy tail. Its emerald pupils shone brilliantly, as if trying to absorb Karen's gaze. The nearby cherry tree was swaying to the rhythm of the wind. Everything seemed gorgeous and fabulous, as if trying to attract everyone who entered this garden full of sweet fragrances and birds' songs. Meanwhile, the cat approached the bench where Karen was sitting and jumped up to her, rubbing against her. "Oh, my little one." Karen stroked her gently, amazed by her fluffy coat. "You like being here, aren't you?" The cat bent over and reached out her paws to Karen's jacket, as if she was trying to count all the buttons on it. "Oh, you definitely like my jacket, don't you?" Karen watched the cat, mesmerized, looking up at her despite herself. There was something magnificent and unexplainable in each of that cat's moves, something that made Karen stare into her eyes longer and longer until those two emerald pupils emerged in a single flashing ball, spinning around like a magic portal, calling to a new dimension. Everyone who looked at it at once. Meanwhile, the cat began to break into Karen's mind like a gentle wind blowing into it. The little girl felt dizzy and then sleepy, noticing how this green wave was taking over her body and transporting her into the magical green portal. The entire garden had remained beyond the world Karen used to know, a world she considered ordinary since her childhood, full of simple miracles she had become accustomed to seeing every day and had grown up to. At first, all her previous life passing by in a small wooden house after her grandma's death seemed as if it had never existed at all. She couldn't find a response within herself or explain the changes taking place in her own soul, mesmerized by this green portal moving forward or staying here. Haunted by unbearable memories of her loneliness and her grandma's loss, all felt like torment, something too difficult to cope with. She felt eager to leap into this new universe, its charm captivating her and taking her breath away. The distant sounds of the sea called her to take that one decisive step and begin her new life. And at last, she stepped forward. The green whirl embraced her gently, its soft hands carrying her through hundreds of similar green portals, each one shimmering softly. Her ears grew numb, as did the rest of her body, making her feel as light as the wind. She opened her eyes and took a deep, trembling breath. Was it all a dream? But the surroundings spoke contradictorily. The first thing she saw was the blue transparent water of the sea beneath her. Gently touching her feet, seagull voices echoed in the fresh air, filled with sunlight and a strange melody. Indeed, it was the song her grandma used to sing to her as a lullaby. But now it sounded unfamiliar, as if she was hearing it for the first time in her life. Where am I? What happened to me? She wondered. By chance, she noticed a little girl her age standing nearby, tossing pebbles into the clear water, making them jump like frogs. Karen immediately stood up and approached the girl. "Hi, I'm Karen. I'm new here. I don't know how I got here," she blurted out. The girl turned her face towards Karen, her eyes shining like two brilliant emeralds. "No one knows, but they always come here," she answered softly. Chapter 2. People call me Forget-Me-Not. I've lived here my whole life, surrounded by flowers, coming here every evening to watch the sunset, like now. The girl said, her gaze fixed on Karen as if she weren't surprised to see her at that moment. "But it seems to be morning, doesn't it?" Karen asked, feeling slightly confused by her explanation. "Since the very beginning of my life, we've called this evening," replied Forget-Me-Not. "When the sun sets, taking the neighbourhood with its fire, even the ocean cannot extinguish it, only mirrors it." Karen sat down on the sand, overwhelmed by this new strange feeling. "But what about my grandma? Why am I still hearing her favourite melody?" she wondered, unable to find an answer. "You hear voices from another coast, which is 1,000 years from here," responded Forget-Me-Not softly. "Unfortunately, they will never reach us anymore. But we preserved their history and traditions carefully for many years." She sat down next to Karen and threw another pebble into the quiet, clear sea. Karen breathed nervously, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "I can't remember where I was 5 minutes ago, but I still remember this melody clearly. Was it essential to recognize the melody afterward? It still doesn't make any sense to me." Feeling exhausted, she bent her knees and grabbed hot sand, filling her fingers with it. She felt that everything that had happened was a dream, a mild, smooth dream that made her feel nervous and insecure. But why? "Are you afraid of that melody touching your ears, or of this clear, bright night?" Forget Me Not reached out to her and drew her closer to the waves splashing against the rocks nearby. "Come with me. I have something to show you. This night promises to be fabulous." The girl smiled, her eyes shining with that vibrant green colour. "But why are you persistently insisting that it's night when I see morning?" protested Karen. Forget-Me-Not exploded with a hearty laugh. "I guess I lied to you. Your soul has gotten used to this light, which has eventually made you confused about the true meaning of the word. There is no place to hide. Only this great yellow moon is illuminating your lonely past. Did your grandma used to sing you a lullaby?" The girl turned her tanned, fresh face towards Karen. "How did you know she did? And why do you call the sun a star?" "I know I grew up somewhere else, but I've never called the sun a moon," Karen said, feeling completely broken and unsure of how to calm her pounding heart. "I can figure it out, my dear. You've been lied to for years. But now it's time to forgive yourself and drop these chains that tie you to the past." The girl led her to the sea. Watch it carefully." Karen started gazing at the sea. And little by little, it became clearer and clearer until she saw her own reflection. She saw something. She saw herself sitting in a garden next to her grandma, singing a lullaby while patiently making yarn. Then suddenly the scene changed. In the next moment, she noticed her grandma leaving her alone and walking back home. The song was abruptly interrupted, and the girl, whom she recognized as herself, began to cry, mourning her grandma's absence. Then she saw fighting crowds gathering in the area, filling it with violence. At the same moment, the sun in the sky was replaced by darkness, and the moon appeared in its throne. Because of the fury of your people, the sun hid itself, and the moon took its place, the girl said to Karen, who at that moment felt completely disorientated and broken. The grandma sat in a chair, swaying gently back and forth, whistling her favourite lullaby. The neighbourhood was quiet, and only distant sounds reached her ears. The sea called for the sun to mirror itself in its waves, and still it remained unanswered. Since the war had begun and more people had fallen into its infernal flames, Grandma had made up her mind to sing her lullaby daily, to maintain a strong connection with her granddaughter, whom she had lost many centuries ago due to the unexpected events that swept through her village. It was when the giants, 10 meters tall, called Atlantes, brought violence and chaos. She also remembered the day the moon replaced the sun, a moment that changed her life once and for all. Then she believed in that bright green eye called the moon, which controlled everything beneath the sky and hypnotized everyone with its coldness. Forget-me-not gazed at Karen intently, then entered the water and immediately swam away. "Hang on! Hold on! I can't swim!" cried the already shocked Karen. But the wind muffled her hopeless efforts to reach out to her new friend. Forget-me-not easily disappeared into the sudden fog that was rolling in along the coast. Grandma's insistent melody still echoed in her ears. She rushed forward into the water, but the first thing she encountered was an unexplainable fear that the water could suddenly turn into flames, which terrified her. Only the abandoned leaky boat was approaching the coast as if it were calling her to revisit her past. Karen looked around hopelessly. There was no chance to stay here after losing her only guide on this island. Now fallen into oblivion, she was still confused, unsure whether it was a dream or reality, but she stepped forward toward the leaky boat, eager to get out of there as quickly as possible. When she sat down, the boat sailed away as if some invisible spirit were guiding it out into the open sea. Chapter 3. Your Majesty, the girl is on her way to Cat's Island. She'll be here in 3,000 light years, reported Forget-Me-Not, bowing before the fire-shaped giant seated on his throne, listening carefully to his servant. The 20-meter candles immediately lit up, illuminating the ruined interior of this ancient castle. Several cat-shaped shadows mirrored on the red brick wall and dashed into the darkness. Did you make her believe that the sun is always replaced with a moon? Questioned the giant. Red flames flickered out of his mouth as he spoke. Your Majesty, I suppose she is meant to follow her grandma's lullaby, replied Forget-Me-Not, rising from her knees and preparing for his next question. I know she's still strongly attached to it, even after we ruined her village and shattered her hopes, but her soul is eager to face the truth. She will climb any highest rock to see her son once more, murmured the giant, closing his eyes. Bright green light illuminated his face as he spoke. Forget-Me-Not left the castle and decided to visit the abandoned garden where she first met the strange Karen. She sat down on the bench, closed her eyes, and began listening to the distant sound of the sea. Something had changed since this garden had lost its inhabitants, transforming into a strange, eerie place to sit. The path leading downward seemed to call her to follow it. Forget-Me-Not stood up and quickly ran down the slope, pushing through thorny bushes that caused her to stumble all the way down. At last, she reached the coast, where the cool, fresh sea waves touched her feet. The footprints she had left behind were still visible in the sand. She's just left. I wish you good luck, my dear Karen. The girl whispered, and the wind carried her words into the air. Seagulls screeched overhead, circling the abandoned coast under the endless blue sky. Maybe you'll discover why these replacements were made and why the sun turned into the moon. I'm sure you'll understand it quite soon. Meanwhile, Karen's leaky boat sailed farther and farther from her memories, drifting into the fog as it moved into the unknown. Chapter 4. The wind was blowing into Karen's face, making her feel cold. She shivered and looked around. The surroundings, covered by the fog, made these southern landscapes look anxious, as if the green eye was watching this little traveller from its high perch very intensely. The clouds hid and revealed themselves on the horizon, playing a game of hide and seek. From time to time, the boat swayed heavily, following the stream as if trying to knock her passenger over, sternly reminding Karen of danger. But the girl felt confident enough to make her way to this sound in her ears, which was like a lullaby. Forget-Me-Not was gazing into the distance, trying to recognize a faint, small, bright star there. She closed her eyes and began singing her favourite lullaby, calling Karen's name within the melody. Oh, my princess, oh, my love, please keep going until sunrise. The senior will not laugh. If you find this island twice, the green eye went down dispersing in the fog. It's going to sleep, but still it's watching me. There is no place to hide. She shivered and looked around. No one was there to see her loneliness in this abandoned place. She kept singing the lullaby. If you find this island twice, the green eye sank below, disappearing into the fog. Please keep going until sunrise. The senior would not laugh. Karen, my dear, where are you now? The coast remained silent, only the pebbles and sea waves nearby. Grandma stood up and followed the path that led to the shore. The thorny bushes tried to tear her long dress, and the birds' songs, hidden here and there, accompanied her silent journey. Unable to bear her granddaughter's absence, she decided to reveal herself in front of the forgiveness Atlantean, who dwelled in the sea. She kept all her memories muddled and rushed forward, determined to carefully preserve each moment of her past until she reached the shore. Then she addressed the sea. If I've lost my keys to pass, you are the one I can trust. Let me ask you what I've done until the storm has begun. Immediately the sea responded, tossing out objects that looked familiar to Grandma. Among them were 2 shoes Karen used to wear and her favourite book, one that told stories of sea travellers, which Karen loved to read. Oh, she had always been a dreamer, seeking a way to herself. Grandma closed her eyes. Suddenly the great giant appeared in her mind's eye, shaped of water, looking at her with a stern gaze. You think I stole Karen from you? How many times did you feel abandoned? The giant asked angrily. But you have never forgiven yourself for your past. So how is she supposed to forgive herself then? As quickly as he had appeared, he vanished. Grandma opened her eyes and reached the sea, which was calm and clear at that moment. She bent over, dipped her hands into the water, and washed her tear-streaked face. Then, deliberately, she looked up at the sky, toward the place where she believed the green eye watching her must be. Meanwhile, in the middle of the sea where Karen sailed, a gentle warm rain began to fall, making the girl feel a sense of release and happiness. A beautiful rainbow appeared in the blue, clear sky, adding to the moment's serenity. Chapter 5. Immediately a black cloud appeared on the horizon. Karen shivered, closed her eyes, and at the same moment she saw a giant-shaped black smoke watching her intensely. Are you still blaming yourself for losing your grandma? I am the smoke caused by the fire that burns away all the bad moments of your life. Do you see the ash of your memories caught by the air and thrown into the sea? The giant laughed and reached out to Karen. Poor Karen felt herself start to become smaller and smaller until she turned into a tiny figure in the giant's palm. What's going on? Where am I? Karen tried to observe her surroundings, but it seemed that the answers came sooner than her questions. Now you see that all your grief over losing your grandma is as huge as my palm, and you are only a tiny grain of sand on it. The giant burst out laughing, even harder, and the wind turned into a whirl that collected the poor girl and dropped her into the open sea. While she was falling, it seemed to her that many centuries had passed during the descent. The forests, the places she loved to walk, her beautiful garden, all those things mixed up in her head, making her fear grow more and more. The giant's voice echoed in Karen's ears like the rumble of thunder. Make your choice immediately, or you'll be broken upon the rocks. If you don't forgive yourself sincerely, you are finished. The giant's voice grew louder and louder. Karen realised that if she didn't make up her mind now, everything could end instantly. She cried out, "Yes, I'm forgiving myself. I'm forgiving myself. Help me. Don't let me fall down." At that moment, she truly felt all her griefs being released and turned into ash. The warm feeling of self-forgiveness embraced her as a colourful rainbow spread over her head. She closed her eyes, gasping for air. She found herself on her leaky boat, sailing forward into the unknown, it feeling like waking up after a nightmare. Watching the horizon, Grandma saw black ash falling onto the sand, transforming into morning dew. She smiled. Chapter 6. Forget-me-not was sitting on the floor holding a little mirror in her hand. Little by little, her beautiful young face shaped different forms, gradually turning into that of an old lady. The old lady looked at her intensely in her reflection, not blinking her eyes either. The girl got scared of what she saw there and threw the mirror away. "No way, it must be a dream, or this green eye is playing with me. What if Karen won't reach Cat Island? She is her only hope to know the future." Meanwhile, Karen's boat was reaching the island full of colourful flowers that appeared on the horizon. The fog had been retreating, revealing the full beauty of this unknown land that called to Karen, urging her to embark there as soon as possible. Finally, her leaky boat reached the shore, and she stepped onto the ground. With no idea what to expect from this new discovery, Karen dashed forward, smelling the flowers, savouring their fragrances, and feeling utterly happy about what she had just seen. "Oh, it's so amazing. I would love to stay here for the rest of my life," exclaimed Karen, jumping around and weaving a colourful wreath of flowers. Then she placed it on her head and looked around. There was a crystal clear silence embracing her soul, giving her space to breathe and feel at peace. Suddenly, she heard a familiar melody coming from the nearby forest. "Oh, my princess, oh, my love, please keep going until sunrise. The senior will not laugh if you find this island twice." Karen shivered and listened carefully. The voice sounded again soft and gentle. "Oh, my princess, oh, my love, please keep going until sunrise. The senior will not laugh if you find this island twice." "Grandma!" Karen cried out and rushed forward toward the forest from which she had heard the melody. But as she approached, the forest began to transform into a reflection, like the images people used to see in the water. Grandma was close, within reach. Karen reached out to touch her, but at the same moment, she was thrown back by the invisible force. "Stand back, Karen," cried Grandma. "They won't let you move forward until you reach the island of cats, where all your questions will be answered." Meanwhile, on a different island, Grandma tried to signal Karen, pointing out the way to the island of cats. She saw her granddaughter in flesh and blood and reaching out desperately, but was unable to help her. "Karen, I know you'll find me, and we will reunite very soon. Whatever happens, I'll never leave you alone. I'm on this cat's island. Find me there." Grandma's voice trembled with hope and longing. Tears of despair and a feeling of loss overwhelmed her, draining her of strength, and she collapsed onto the sand unconscious. Karen kept watching as her grandma reached out to her. Still unable to grasp her hand, Despite the distance, the impossible separation, the girl knew her grandma was still alive. She believed she would walk through countless centuries, if needed, just to be with her again. Part 2, To Face Self, Chapter 1. The castle's brick walls were illuminated by innumerable torches set at various angles along the long and narrow hall through which Forget-Me-Not was making her way back to her master. Was that horrible? Flaming giant, her master possessing all her being, or just her flesh? As she moved forward, her anxious thoughts transformed into an invisible fiery part of herself. How long would she be able to serve her memories, living in this soulless place called Cat's Island? For many centuries, she had been imprisoned on this island, absorbing all the chaos and lifelessness around her. The vases with flowers only hinted at life. The flowers themselves were made of stone instead of being alive. What about the cats? Since she stepped into that green eye, which turned into a portal, she stopped remembering her past. There were only remnants of those shining, bright moments that had once filled her life with joy and happiness. Is it not the time to escape from it? Her eyes lit up and immediately went dark again, giving way to a sorrow. She stopped walking, sat down on the cold floor, and cried. How could she explain this to Karen, whose soul was on her way to encounter the island that Forget-Me-Not was desperately trying to escape from? Poor Karen, she had no idea that there was no way to truly know the truth, only endless spinning around the past like a crazy sun orbiting the globe again and again. She tried to mentally connect with Karen, sending her a signal to be careful when sailing to this island to avoid all possible temptations, but at the same time, she realized that her thoughts about Karen only reflected her own fears. It seemed she harbored a strange feeling about all the chaos she was living through. Why had she always seen Karen as part of her inner world, an almost magical influence on the storyline? The tailwind pushed the leaky boat forward, which confused Karen aboard. As it moved onward, new scenery began to take shape on the horizon. The water ahead looked suspiciously green, as if it were a reflection of that green moon, which never stopped watching her. Why is it watching me all the way? Karen asked herself, trying to calm down. Meanwhile, her leaky boat was approaching the green water, which made Karen feel even more frightened. She had expected to see Grandma imprisoned in this magical space, but instead she only heard faint sounds of that familiar lullaby, echoing in her mind like a crystal voice of her soul. Oh, my princess, oh, my love, please keep going until sunrise. The senior will not laugh if you find this island twice. Karen listened to her voice carefully. Why are these sounds so inexplicable? She wondered. She knew that her inner voice belonged to her grandma, and that her past dwelled somewhere between this lullaby and the strange girl she had met on that island, the one called Forget-Me-Not Flower. "Oh, my princess, oh, my love, please keep going until sunrise. The senior will not laugh if you find this island twice." By the time the water was illuminating, casting strange reflections, Karen couldn't believe what she saw. She closed her eyes briefly and opened them again. When she did, she saw the stranger, the forget-me-not, embracing her grandma amidst her favourite flourishing garden, the one she used to walk in. A small fluffy cat sat nearby, carefully rubbing the girl's leg. A new insight suddenly dawned on Karen. "Isn't this the cat I used to love to play with? Why is that cat here with that girl? I have to do something before it's too late." Simultaneously, the waves around Karen's boat had been rising, ready to absorb her with the green light. One moment more, and she was soon completely shocked by what she saw. The enormous green giant made of the shining green light rose in front of her and began speaking to the frightened girl. The giant's words echoed in her ears, making the knees tremble. "How long have you been sitting in your dreaming garden, hopelessly trying to get your grandma back? Have you ever thought that as long as your memory is awakened, you are its prisoner?" The giant laughed and disappeared as soon as he showed himself. Karen looked at the splashes made by the giant and suddenly saw herself, forget-me-not, and her beloved grandma reaching out to her. She cried out loud, trying to quiet her own voice of despair. Something inside had been telling her that it was a miracle or a mirage, and that it would pass soon. But the more she stared at the crystal clear water, trying to distinguish those familiar figures, the more she was absorbed by the all-consuming green light entering her soul and tearing it into tiny pieces. In the next second, she was caught by the wind, and then she opened her eyes and found herself sitting on a bench near a familiar cherry tree. A lovely, fluffy cat was murmuring nearby. Nearby, a cat was staring at her from time to time, waving its fluffy tail. Its emerald pupil shone brilliantly, as if trying to absorb Karen's gaze. The nearby cherry tree was swaying to the rhythm of the wind. Everything seemed gorgeous and fabulous, as if trying to attract everyone who entered this garden full of sweet fragrances and bird songs. Meanwhile, the cat approached the bench where Karen was sitting and jumped up to her, rubbing against her. "Oh, my little one," Karen stroked her gently, amazed by a fluffy coat. "You like being here, aren't you?" The cat bent over and reached out her paws to Karen's jacket, as if she was trying to count all the buttons on it. "Oh, you definitely like my jacket, don't you?" Karen watched the cat mesmerized, looking up at her despite herself. The cat's eyes were turning green, forming a portal that seemed very familiar to Karen. At the same time, she noticed the book lying nearby with a bright pink cover entitled Forget-Me-Not's Adventures. She opened this mysterious book on its title page and read. She felt eager to leap into this new universe, its charm captivating her and taking her breath away. The distant sounds of the sea called her to take that one decisive step and begin her new life. And at last, she stepped forward. The green world embraced her gently, its soft hands carrying her through hundreds of similar green portals, each one shimmering softly. Her ears grew numb, as did the rest of her body, making her feel as light as the wind. She opened her eyes and took a deep trembling breath. Was it all a dream? But the surroundings spoke contradictorily. The first thing she saw was the blue transparent water of the sea beneath her, gently touching her feet. Seagull voices echoed in the fresh air, filled with sunlight and strange melody. Indeed, it was the song her grandma used to sing to her as a lullaby. But now it sounded unfamiliar, as if she was hearing it for the first time in her life. Where am I? What's happened to me? Karen jumped up from what she had just read and looked around, trying to make sure that no one was seeing her. Was it a dream? Or was I really captivated by the strange universe, and even more so by that mysterious girl called Forget-Me-Not, who reminded me of myself, Karen? She carefully turned the page and resumed reading. The entire garden had remained beyond the world Karen used to know, a world she considered ordinary since her childhood, full of simple miracles she had become accustomed to seeing every day and had grown numb to. At first, all her previous life passing by in a small wooden house after her grandma's death seemed as if it had never existed at all. She couldn't find a response within herself or explain the changes taking place in her own soul, mesmerized by this green portal, moving forward or staying here, haunted by unbearable memories of her loneliness and her grandma's loss, all felt like torment, something too difficult to cope with. She stopped reading and looked at the place where the fluffy cat had been sitting. It was gone. Karen immediately felt frightened by the sudden unexpected changes occurring at that moment, but everything seemed to disillusion and break her. Even the wind sounded menacing. What is going on here? I clearly remember that just 5 minutes ago I was on that magical island and now I'm sitting here. She shivered from the cold and turned the next page. Karen looked at the splashes made by the giant and suddenly saw herself, Forget-Me-Not, and her beloved grandma reaching out to her. She cried out loud, trying to quiet her own voice of despair. Something inside had been telling her that it was all a miracle, all a mirage, and that it would pass soon. But the more she stared at the crystal clear water, trying to distinguish these familiar figures, the more she was absorbed by the all-consuming green light entering her soul and tearing it into tiny pieces. In the next second, she was caught by the wind, and then she opened her eyes and found herself sitting on a branch near a familiar cherry tree. A lovely fluffy cat was murmuring nearby. It can't be. How does this book know everything that happened to me in the past? Cried Karen. She turned another page, but instead of words, she found a blank page. She kept turning more and more, but the result was the same. It seemed that the rest of this book was up to her to write herself. Karen tried to pinch herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming or hallucinating. She did it 10 times, then refocused on the pressing issues that needed her attention. She stood up and rushed towards the nearby path that led to the sea, the sound of the waves echoing in her ears. In 1 minute, she reached the lonely coast, where seagulls were screaming. But it wasn't lonely anymore. The beach had turned into a lively place filled with many people relaxing under the sun, children building sandcastles, and parents lying nearby soaking up the rays. She dashed towards the crowd, desperate to ask if anyone knew what had been happening here. Unable to endure the inner torment any longer, her eyes landed on a girl sitting on the sand, gazing into the distance. She seemed like the right person to ask. "Excuse me, where am I?" Karen murmured, struggling to find the right words to sound clear. "What year is it now?" The girl turned to face her, and at that moment, Karen was petrified. In that tanned, beautiful silhouette, she recognized the forget-me-not. Chapter 2. The tanned girl stepped aside from her. "I'm not forget-me-not. What kind of name is that? Only given to cats." She looked at Karen, completely surprised. "What a name," she repeated the phrase she had just pronounced. "I'm Karen." Less than anything, Karen expected to hear her own name. She started feeling dizzy and faint, and in the next second she found herself lying on the hot sand. Water droplets were slightly touching her face. It was the tan girl trying to bring her back to life. Wake up! What's happening to you?" The girl was calling someone to help her in her emergency. In a few seconds, Karen saw the face that seemed so familiar to her. The feminine voice seemed to belong to an old lady and sounded soft and familiar too. She opened her eyes and could not believe what she saw. Here was a grandma trying to bring her to her senses. "Are you okay, dear?" the old lady asked, lifting her up by her back and looking into her eyes with the sky-coloured eyes. "Grandma," Karen managed to spell out, tears streaming down her face. "Thank God I finally met you." She reached out and embraced the old lady as tightly as she could. Her face was filled with tears. "Grandma, I can't believe I finally found you." The old lady, embarrassed by such a sudden gesture, felt completely confused and had no idea how to react. The tan girl stood up and stepped back. "What, Grandma? Do you have more grandchildren, Grandma?" she asked, looking at her grandmother with a hint of jealousy. The old lady turned back to the girl, who looked like a forget-me-not, and impressively pointed out, "Be quiet. The poor girl doesn't feel well, does she? Instead of showing off your caprices, you'd rather help me." The girl calmed down and approached Karen, whose head was still dizzy and faint. "What's going on? Where am I?" She couldn't believe what she had just seen. "Are you okay, dear? Are you sure you don't need a doctor?" The old lady carefully asked Karen, trying to clarify the situation and understand what had happened to the strange girl fainting on the hot sand. "Are you okay, girl?" repeated the old lady, staring at her intently. "Yes, I feel better now, but why?" she said, pointing to the tan girl, coincidentally Karen. "Why does she look like the girl I always knew?" The old lady helped Karen to get up, brushing the sand out of her hair and holding Karen's hand, asked her kindly, "What is your name, dear?" "My name is Karen," murmured Karen, still feeling faint. "What? I?" The tan girl standing nearby, who reminded Karen of her old friend, suddenly blurted out, "Such a coincidence, isn't it, dear?" The old lady, who looked like Karen's grandma, turned to the tanned girl. "Grandma, it's me," murmured Karen, holding the old lady's hand and trying to make her recognize her in the confused girl, her granddaughter whom she had lost many centuries ago. "Don't you recognize me?" She tried to clear up this misunderstanding as quickly as possible. The old lady smiled and looked at the tanned girl nearby and stood up. At that very moment, the waves of the sea rose enormously, turning the sand into a tumultuous mess. The old lady suddenly started laughing with a monstrous voice. "Jar, jar, jar. Have you really believed that I'm your grandma?" At the same moment, Karen faced a huge sand giant standing in front of her, laughing in her face, and the crowded beach transformed into a complete desert simultaneously. "You have passed the test, not perfectly, but enough to move forward. Now you've learned how to embrace your worst fears and channel them in the right direction." After saying these words, the giant disappeared, turning into a cloud of sand. Karen lay down on the sand and cried out loud. The entire desert seemed unable to contain her grief. Filled with tears, the girl was completely broken. She had no idea how to escape this abandoned place. She tried to breathe, but she couldn't. The sand island started spinning around in front of her eyes, pulling her vision deeper and deeper. Karen tried to breathe again, but it was impossible. "Maybe this is the end of all my dreams." The thoughts raced through her mind like wild horses. The sand world was already touching her eyes, engulfing her entire body in the sandy storm. She opened her eyes and looked around. She was sitting on a beach in her beloved garden, holding a book open to a specific page. She gazed at the open page and froze, petrified by what she read there. Karen lay down on the sand and cried out loud. The entire desert seemed unable to contain her grief, filled with tears. The girl was completely broken. She had no idea how to escape this abandoned place. She tried to breathe, but she couldn't. The sand island started spinning around in front of her eyes, pulling her vision deeper and deeper. Karen tried to breathe again, but it was impossible. "Maybe this is the end of all my dreams." The thoughts raced through her mind like wild horses. The sand world was already touching her eyes, engulfing her entire body in the sandy storm. Now she realized that it was up to her to write the end of this story. There were some blank pages left to record the past. Chapter 3, from the author. While the whole world has been staying curious about Karen's state of mind, there have been fewer characters introduced and some were presented improperly. My dear reader, you may not know who all these giants we met during the story were or how they connect to Karen's storyline. There is no clear answer, and there may not be an explanation for such a mysterious fairy tale. Have you ever tried to put yourself in the main character's place, endowing yourself with all these shapes and sensations? Sometimes we all have to face our past, unzipping our memories from their wrapped covers. At times, this makes us feel annoyed. At other times, it makes us feel anxious. But whenever we think about it, we realize it's up to us to decide the fate of our memories. A grain of sand is equal to millions of grains driven by the wind, flying and falling down as if they were anxious relatives with no shelter to rest. Someone loses their past hopelessly, trying to recover any piece of it. Our imagination's full of nightmares created by our mind, which at times treats us cruelly, showing no mercy, as if we were endless prisoners of our fantasies, seeing no way out. After Karen lost her beloved grandma, she set herself on a path of being tested by her tormenting feelings. The garden where she used to read her books and play with her cat gradually became her most unbearable nightmare. She imprisoned herself in a tiny world filled with lullabies and great monsters which embodied her most frightening fears, such as losing all responsibilities in an instant, facing reality. Her native dreams of regaining those miraculous moments of the past by staying present now seem distant. And now her tiny world is being completely shattered, turning into a swirling whirl of sand. Karen put the book aside and looked around. The cat was sitting nearby, rubbing her head against Karen's feet. "Oh, my beloved cat. What was her name? I barely remember. What's happened to me?" The girl stood up and decided to walk to freshen up. The anxiety didn't leave her for a second. She tried to analyze what had just happened, but couldn't find an answer that more or less corresponded to her situation. She remembered a dream she had as a child in which huge men were lying in a hospital connected to life support systems, kind of like medical respirators, and many small doctors were running around like tiny nervous ants building houses. They served these giant people whose breathing echoed in Karen's ears like a nightmare. What planet did they come from? She also remembered that the walls of that place were covered with a stinking slimy liquid dripping from the ceiling like in a Chinese torture chamber. Slowly and patiently, she tried to keep her mortal fear awakened for as long as possible. There were no walls between the operational rooms. Everyone could see each other naked or stressed out. The anxiety that grew as her memories resurfaced kept her on edge. At the end of the hallway, she recalled a bright blinking lamp that caught her attention. She followed it and then... Who were all these giant people? She remembered their names: regret, sorrow, doubt. All these names related to human feelings and experiences. The further she moved forward in her dream, the older she became physically. And that blinking lamp seemed to be laughing in her face, as if it was a game with no real outcome for any of the characters involved. Then she saw herself as if it was a mirror reflecting every single moment of her. She saw herself as a grandma. Why did she look as if she were her twin? "Grandma," she shouted loudly, "are you here?" But no one responded in the overwhelming silence. She only saw people her age sitting with their cushions in various corners of the hallway. Two doors were slightly ajar from one, a stuffy, airless warmth from the other, a chilling cold that made her feel frozen. "Which way will you follow?" The voice spoke to her. She immediately rushed toward the airless, stuffy corner, where she was swept up by a whirling wind that carried all her memories in a bright, colourful stream. Toys, books and cats floated around her, shouting loudly as if they were alive. let us go, the lullaby Karen used to hear had transformed into nightmare voices engulfing her entire being. We are no longer your prisoners. We are willing to live our own lives. Have mercy on us, they cried out. Suddenly, countless stars began to fall from the sky, bursting in a spectacular explosions at the Earth's surface, one by one, second after second, century after century. The civilization had begun to transform into a different form of its nature, where people were like tiny mechanisms maintained by their extraordinary ability to love. The stars kept falling, and Karen found herself feeling increasingly disconnected from this chaotic world, retreating more and more into a space of harmony where she could find all the answers to the questions that had tormented her for years. Nevertheless, she felt herself aging mentally. Her mindset was able to perceive things as if she were just 6 years old. The bright world carried her body through countless others. Following her shallow breathing, she began to feel like Alice in a marvelous place, jumping from one flower to another and trying to look at things more thoroughly. A soft, gentle voice echoed over her head. Now you've reached your dreams, Karen. Your aspiration to be with those you love has helped you to attain it. Whenever you miss your beloved ones, just come here and you will be reunited with them. You've earned it. All the Atlanteans you encountered on your journey were doubts, but you overcame them all in the name of love. Your heart deserves to love and be loved. In the next moment, she found herself back on the same beach where her story had begun, watching the distant horizon and trying to understand what changes had taken place. Standing right in front of her was an old lady, waving warmly. Grandma, called Karen, rushing forward as if she had been waiting for this touching reunion for centuries. When the lights are turned on. Chapter 1. A street musician was playing his guitar, and a golden autumn seemed to listen intently, gently scattering leaves onto the ground. As the young man strummed his melodies, he began to feel his body grow, increasingly tense and restless. A fine sweat broke out on his forehead until finally he fainted. When he opened his eyes, he saw himself from the side like a dark silhouette standing near the wall. The dark silhouette standing near the wall was twisting with his legs as if he were dancing or simply attracting the churchgoers hurrying to attend the morning liturgy in the St. Paul Dome. It seemed that no one was paying attention to this old wall made of red brick, which seemed to be one of those memories that made us feel anxious or frustrated. Nevertheless, the darkness was gradually fading, and the first glimmers of the sun shaped the horizon. The silhouette appeared to be less worried about the world going back and forth in front of him. A few seconds later, it formed a smile, revealing its white teeth, and in the next moment, the silhouette separated from the wall and stepped into the first sun glare. The figure belonged to a man around 33 years old, wearing an old ripped jacket and trousers, torn in some places, leading any pedestrian to think that he had probably faced many challenges in his life, challenges that made him look older than he actually was. He wasn't reaching out with his hand to ask for money, nor did his spontaneous appearance cause any reaction from the churchgoers. Their minds were probably filled with their morning prayers and their punctuality to be at the right place at the right time. The first sounds of traffic filled the streets with their ordinary yet simultaneously unbearable buzzing, making anyone feel more nervous than ever. The whole world seemed to be becoming less crazy than usual, drawn by the first glares of the sun that attracted more random pedestrians. The man who had already proclaimed his existential crisis in front of those hurried Philistines coming from anywhere and going nowhere paid no attention to his misery. He simply appeared before them like a stoic, trying to maintain his balance by standing on one foot. At that moment, his torn clothes seemed to cry out for compassion and love, waving like ancient banners of prophets who had lived many centuries ago, boldly expressing their strong disagreement and unshakable resolve to see their mission through to the end. Unfortunately, people were so absorbed in their morning routines, pretending to be deaf and numb to the world around them, ignoring the very things that demand our involvement to save a life. Not a single person appeared to reach out to this stoic man, offering him bread or a cup of coffee, things so loved by those hypocrites passing by, paying no attention to their soulmate at all. Aren't we brothers? Are we? The buzzing of the cars only grew louder, making the stoic man feel dizzy until his head spun in a vertical circle and disconnected from reality that persistently ignored his existence. In the next moment, he collapsed, and the world before his eyes closed its curtains. The cloud of oblivion gently embraced him, placing his thoughts and dreams into a desert without water. He saw himself as a prophet, crying out to caravans passing by, merchants carrying their goods to sunny, beautiful countries, filled with shining lights and sparkling stars at night.
There were also the prettiest Arab girls performing ballet dances before an audience hungry for physical love, their minds entering crazy orgasmic reactions that seemed to inhabit their tiny, miserable bodies. Who knows? Perhaps they had once prayed to those chubby, healthy bodies emerging from their imaginations, growing more vivid with each passing day. Oh, hypocrites! Who allowed you to escape my wrath? The prophetical words spun around this stoic man's mind, making him feel as if he were a judge of this crazy world. He rushed forward amidst camels, overwhelmed by their burdens, and struck them with his old stick carved from pure gold. He appeared like a stormy wind in a desert scorched by the sun. The merchants, frightened by such an unplanned disruption to their routine, hurried to seize the golden stick. But their arms seemed no match for the strength of the stoic man. "What are you doing, man? Are you crazy?" shouted the merchants, trying to protect their camels from this unexpected intrusion, their minds filled with thoughts of pampered concubines rendered them unable to defend their goods from a single strong man threatening their lives. Suddenly, the entire desert was exposed to a swirling sandstorm that swept away all the camels and goods, vanishing into the dusty air. The merchants screamed and cried out, giving up their dreams of sharing beds with Arab concubines, and were finally caught up by the wild desert winds. Their tiny flying bodies fluttered like ants, floundering in the air. Meanwhile, a stoic man felt dizzy. He collapsed, and the last thing he saw was a brilliant, clear lake at the heart of the desert. Just another mirage, he thought, and then he fainted. The strong wind picked him up and swirled his tiny body in the sandstorm. Within the next few moments, he found himself lying at the bottom of the desert, struggling effortlessly to catch the air. Suddenly, he noticed that the air he thoroughly tried to embrace had turned into clear water, filling the area around him. He tried to swim out instantly and opened his eyes. It was the same place near Happiness Street, frequently filled with crowds going back and forth in their hope to arrive on time for a sacred liturgy, to attend the ceremony of breaking bread and drinking wine as Christ's body. Unfortunately, none of them was even prepared to reach out to the stoic man lying on the sidewalk, leaning his head on a curb, as if at that moment he portrayed Jesus, allowing his disciples to lean their heads on him, a scene from a bunch of centuries ago. Then one of them was swearing never to betray him, whatever happened. The whole world had recently been preoccupied with fulfilling its desires and ambitions in a proper manner. Selling fruits at a nearby corner, stealing money from someone's pocket, or disrespectfully threatening neighbours as if the latter were mere toys, worn out by their previous owners and simply discarded onto the street as unnecessary. No one even tried to approach the man whose face was stoically pleading for compassion and love. The newspaper boys no longer scurried back and forth as they used to do long ago. They had been replaced by drones flying overhead, issuing warnings to those who accidentally stepped outside. "What are you doing here? Get to work. Get to work. Or you don't have any credits to pay, do you? If you are still free, you must attend the nearest police station to show yourself." Two drones approached the lying man, their small red eyes flashing angrily. "Warning, warning, there is an intruder. There is an intruder. Warning. He is out of his responsibilities. He doesn't have any credits to pay. He doesn't have any credits to pay. This sidewalk cannot exist at the expense of other taxpayers only. If he cannot be employed immediately, he should be wiped out from our civilization." After making two more passes over the man's head, they flew away to report to the nearest police station. Fortunately, a little girl, dressed in torn clothes, with soot-stained face, immediately woke the man. Wake up, they traced you. We have to leave now or you'll be numbered among the walking zombies," she said urgently. The man looked around, rubbing his eyes, trying to gather his senses. He saw the small, grimy girl reaching out to him with a cute smile. "Come on, we have to go." Following her lead, he obeyed and quickly moved around a corner of the street, infamous for its reputation, so dangerous that drones rarely ventured there. Chapter 2. The dome was filled with churchgoers lighting candles and kissing icons adorned with strange figures, as if these figures held their own hierarchy. The priest appeared on the pulpit, delivering a speech filled with pathos and hypocrisy. However, instead of offering sincere words addressed to everyone present, he pointed out their debts and demanded they pay them as soon as possible. While he spoke, a red lamp near the entrance flickered intermittently, turning red whenever someone failed to pay enough attention to the speaker's voice. At the same time, a figure belonging to that distracted individual was highlighted, indicating that this person owed a fee in the name of God. God? Was it truly their God? Or merely a tool used to manipulate and corrupt the churchgoers? But these well-meaning churchgoers genuinely believed they were participating in this ceremony of hypocrisy, where everyone had been promised entrance to the kingdom of heaven if they paid. They truly considered themselves pure, their lives cleansed of any sins. In the green corner of this enormous stone was even a screen used for the confession of domestic animals. Some of the churchgoers held their pocket-sized dogs and cats, bringing them to confess. Larger dogs were not permitted inside, perhaps because of the high costs associated with such a ceremony. There had been barking and meowing sounds as these surprised pets were made to open their mouths and confess their sins. After the liturgy, each person was assigned a new figure that confirmed their identity upon exiting. No one truly understood why they had been attending such a circus, but everyone believed it was an essential thing to make their lives easier. They had unlearned how to think and analyze, as if their minds had been controlled by someone who knew them far better than they knew themselves. They escaped beggars on street, avoiding to see their grimy face that caused an antipathy, and contemplate deeply within their hearts. Besides considering their lives like a true reflection of the church they attended, to their specific way of thinking, there wasn't any place to those outcasts. Moreover, they were gently greeted by drones hovering overhead, reminding them not to forget to stay within their district and to pay all their taxes on time. The entire city was crowded with these honorable and respectful people going about their routine, seemingly content in this regular but seemingly happy life. Even the shops constantly reminded each visitor of how much they owed after their last visit. In other words, the city was painted in the monotonous colors of human existence. The police officers avoided venturing into some dark criminal areas where they could easily be attacked by the local gangs fighting for their independence, often gathering in small groups to resist control. Ambulances frequently sped back and forth with their sirens blaring, not because of emergencies, but simply to instill fear in pedestrians' hearts. Meanwhile, those who genuinely needed medical help often ignored the ambulances. The drivers used their transport for personal reasons, to pick up their kids from school, collect their wives on the way home, simply because they were distracted by shopping. The entire city was filled with figures that monitored everyone as they left their homes. Some even suggested that a system had been developed to enforce control within their houses, scheduling specific times and days for residents to leave. Yet no one voiced any disagreement or even made a gesture of protest. Even their recently domesticated animals barked and meowed happily, seemingly to keep their owners' mouths shut. Chapter 3. The Stoic's man's name was Paleo. He was young enough to withstand all the difficulties he encountered in his life. His new grimy friends looked at him suspiciously as if he were an alien descended from heaven. "Are you okay?" asked a little girl who led him to an old shelter to hide from the drones spinning around the city. "Yes, I'm fine," he replied, leaning against the nearest wall and closing his eyes. He couldn't wait to return to his dreams about a desert and caravans of hypocrites following the east, dreaming of chubby Arab concubines lying on silk pillows. "They are going to track everyone," said an old man lying nearby, warming his body near a bonfire. "The crazy eye is watching everyone, trying to take total control over everything. They've already tracked us, but we're still able to fight back. Look." He pointed with his cut, bleeding finger at the pile of padded drones whose digital hearts had stopped pounding forever. "They won't bother us. They won't bother anyone anymore," he concluded. pausing between the words as if it carried more weight than just an account of their daily life, filled with danger, anger, and an endless struggle to survive. "So what are we doing now?" asked Paleo, looking around and yawning as if it were the most boring day of his life. Frankly speaking, he had already gotten used to struggling with his new ideology addressed to street beggars, which needed to be wiped out as soon as possible. As one of them, he could withstand saying his word once again. Meanwhile, the girl who led him into this place approached him again, shivering from the cold and trying to get sleepy in his arms. "Yes, that's right," he murmured, covering her back with a torn blanket lying nearby, trying to give her as much protection as possible, as if she were his own daughter. He leaned back against the wall, his eyelids feeling heavier and his eyes finally closed. This time, he was traveling with the girl, holding her hand carefully and trying to protect her from any possible danger. The music surrounded them, and the merchants displaying their goods seemed to resemble ancient heroes emerging from the canvases of famous paintings. They traded Arab sweets, cookies, and their famous halva, which melted in the mouth like fresh honey mixed with chocolate. "Dad, I want you to buy it for me, please," the girl was asking him as if he truly were her father. "Oh dear, we don't have any money, do we?" He tried to avoid such a request, but the girl was insistent. "Please, Dad, I want it. I've never tasted sweets in my life. We've always lived on the street, haven't we, since they started controlling us?" She pointed out some facts about their miserable daily life. The seller approached the girl and reached out with a bundle full of sweets. "Take it, my little princess, it's for you." He smiled kindly, trying to connect with these two strangers standing nearby and transported into this miraculous world. "No, we can't take it," protested Palo. "We don't have any money at all." "It doesn't matter. It has no price. This is my gift for her," replied the long-barbed seller, reaching out with his bundle, which smelled so sweet that at the same moment, Paleo's head started sweating. At that very moment, out of nowhere, the music began to play, and the wind picked up the long-barbed seller and his goods, swirling them into a giant, chaotic tornado accompanied by hearty laughter. Then Paleo and the girl were suddenly transported into a richly decorated palanquin, adorned with countless colourful ribbons fluttering in the wind. They were held aloft by 4 African slaves who led the palanquin along a path lined with gleaming marble, accompanied by the melodies of flutes. The old man stepped out to meet them, greeting the 2 strangers in his domain. "Oh, my beloved children, I'm happy to welcome you into my Father's heavenly kingdom, for you truly deserve to be here. You have overcome many obstacles and never failed to mention your heavenly Father's name. The people of your land are hypocrites. They pray to whoever they wish, but not to God. Their dogs and cats are smarter than they are, refusing to willingly visit their board houses. May God bless you, my children." After the palanquin was lowered, Paleo and the girl descended to the ground. Their bare feet happily touched as if they were forever attached to an endless, cruel embrace. It was a new life they had never expected to live, another chapter in their broken existence now filled with hope and renewal. The old man, who seemingly should have a barb approached. those new strangers and hugged them warmly. "Follow me, I have something to show you." They stepped forward and followed his lead. Together, they entered a brilliant white castle which housed a small clear crystal pond with beautiful swans sailing gracefully within. During their time there, they were offered delicious food to eat. Throughout the meal, Paleo and the girls kept glancing at each other as if they were checking to confirm that this was not just a dream. Suddenly, the familiar siren sounds reached their ears. In an instant, all these miraculous landscapes and castles melted away and vanished into nothingness as suddenly as they appeared. Paleo opened his eyes. "Oh no, it was just a dream," he thought, as reality delivered her menacing message. "Wake up! Wake up!" He urgently tried to rouse the girl lying in his arms. "They have finally traced us. These drones are everywhere." The drones with the crazy red eyes prowled relentlessly, exploring every angle in search of a new free person to capture. Every free citizen had to be immediately numbered and controlled to be administered and subdued. Chapter 4. The senior was playing the piano while his loyal attendant, with chains on his feet, was standing in front of his master, delivering his report. The clear sounds flowed into each other as if they were the voices of the ocean imprisoned within themselves. At times, the attendant nodded his head, following the spontaneous melody and rhythm echoing off the walls of this castle. Built from pure gold, illuminated by many silver torches, the grandeur of His Majesty's domain left visitors in awe. "So, have you been well informed?" The senior paused his playing and looked at his attendant. "I'm afraid to tell the truth, Your Majesty, but since Paleo joined these rebels, we've gained one more free person among us." The senior cast a cold, severe look and said, "Have you ever considered the idea that you might feel less happy than them, serving me in your chains?" The attendant looked at his chains, which seemed to resonate in unison with the melody just played, and awkwardly took 2 steps back. "No, never. There is no way to feel happier than wearing these chains, which ring out in Your Majesty's name." The senior grinned. "Good boy. I expect you and your family to serve my wishes until your final breath." The attendant bowed and replied, "Certainly. I never dreamed of being in a more privileged position. Your chains make me feel alive for some purpose. Before I was chained, I spent years in a pointless struggle for freedom, which stole my best years when I had no master to command or guide me. I felt lost in this fog despite having read many books, but all of them tried to teach me what freedom is, and it seemed to me that their "Shut your mouth and keep me informed. You have plenty of work to do," interrupted the senior, pointing toward the door. "Yes, Your Majesty, I will continue to follow your commands," the attendant said, then bowed and left. The senior stood up and reached for his beloved golden portrait hanging on the wall, depicting the early years of his reign in the City of Freedom. He vividly remembered that the people had not always been chained and submissive. From the moment he seized power, they suddenly realized that all their previous ideals had been shattered by a single blow from his armies. It took him 3 years to establish his control over every district except for one, the only area still free and untouched. He could not understand why this small band of people remained so ignorant and numb to his will. He had done everything to make his citizens feel happy in their chains. Even their numbers inscribed on their foreheads seemed to shimmer with joy each time they entered the church for their morning liturgy. "Oh God," he sighed, "even your domestic animals look smarter. They know they are more responsible for their lives than you are." Suddenly he turned around, as if his personal drone, spinning around the castle and recording every word he uttered, had caught his attention. Then he yawned, showing to this cold and lifeless place his mouth filled with golden teeth. Since the moment he nearly faced betrayal and was almost overthrown after an election in which 95% of the people voted against him and only 5% were in his favor, he resolved to impose more restrictions on his citizens' daily routines. They were now required to pay higher fees to the church for every sin forgiven by his close friend, a local priest named Raj, who had replaced the divine authority of God on this land. He had been placed in charge of all church-related affairs since the moment he sacrificed his own dignity and conscience, choosing the perverse path of hypocrisy and lies. He used to collect fees from the churchgoers and spend the money on endless nights spent with his indulgent concubines, chubby, fresh-smelling of lavender and aroma oils, indulging in pleasures that masked his inner corruption. "Oh, my dear companion, what are you doing now? I would love to hear your opinion on this matter." He sighed once more and closed his eyes. A new day was dawning, coming from the east, bringing with it more tasks that had long awaited his attention. Melina was the name of the grimy girl sleeping in Paleo's hands. Now, he and his new friends were desperately trying to escape the drone attack as soon as the tiny metal birds tracked to their location. Paleo carried the girl in his arms through the chaos, trying to catch up with the others. As they distanced themselves from the mechanical predators, the drones announced their targets with sharp robotic voices. "A grimy girl, a man of 30 years or more. Catch them immediately, immediately." 2 explosions erupted behind them, sending brick walls tumbling and filling the air with a dusty fog. The rebels finally broke free from the encirclement and took refuge in their pre-made bunker. "Is everyone okay?" The old man, the leader of the group, asked his friends. Everyone nodded in response. Paleo carefully placed Melina on her feet. Shaking the dust from her clothes, she smiled and kissed Paleo's cheek in gratitude. Oh, I wish I had a daughter like her, Paleo thought to himself, a gentle smile crossing his face as he looked at her. She stepped forward in embarrassment and looked around. The friends were relaxingly reclining on the broken walls, closing their noses with their thumbs and index fingers due to the air that had recently been contaminated by the chemicals spread by these broken drones lying in a pile of garbage and less likely to attract or threaten anyone. Still, they all seemed to have their last resort there. It had been decided to take a break. Paleo closed his eyes and instantly fell asleep. Chapter 5. Paleo opened his eyes and looked around. Autumn was brilliant with leaves falling as if they were parading the final breath of summer, trying to ignore the harsh reality of life, where everything sooner or later must join the red army of autumn. Any attempt by bright colors to capture his gaze had failed. Faced with the ignorance and silence in which most of his feelings seemed to hide, feelings that contrasted with his true values, which had been carefully nurtured by his past and still guided him in the present. Paleo approached a nearby oak tree and hugged it warmly as if he had known this old tree for years. He felt more anxious than usual. Something was wrong with his dreams. He had been seeing them every single night since the moment he came across that intriguing girl playing the guitar in the quiet park, surrounded by leaves tinged with the red hues of autumn. But now he was the one to play the guitar in this quiet park. His guitar was singing as mournfully as anyone could play on earth, carrying with it all those sounds that added their natural accompaniment to his music. It made him feel like a stranger, coloring his own sadness with all those notes he played. Moments later, he noticed a girl watching him carefully, trying to catch every sound he made, as if it wasn't something ordinary, but something fantastically underrated by the inhabitants of Earth. After his intense gaze, she approached his inspired silhouette, captured by red, yellow, and orange leaves, swirling around this humble musician, who played so mournfully as if he were trying to surprise God itself. Your music sounds so inspiring, as if it were the last melody on planet Earth. I'm serious, she added, casting a serious gaze that made his cheeks flush with colour. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate your kind words about my humble personality. I feel more connected with this universe now. His voice trembled slightly as if it was gently broken by the compliment. Suddenly, she touched his cheek with her warm palm, causing his voice to mumble some indistinct words, the meaning of which he couldn't understand. The whole world seemed to transform into a single dancing arena, with only two red leaves swirling around them. All he remembered were her hands embracing him passionately and gently, as if their meeting had been foreseen by God himself. Then both of them fell to the nearby park ground, each breath echoing softly between them. She kissed him passionately, her tongue exploring his, tasting the exhilarating rush of this newfound craziness. They breathed quickly, unconcerned if someone might see them, lost in their shared sensation, trusting only in this moment to be the greatest they had ever known. Suddenly, at the last moment, she burst into a striking laugh, gently pushing away his guitar and reaching out to touch his tongue with hers. Oh, my little boy, I think you're surprised, aren't you? Her voice sounded ironic, as if they had known each other for centuries. I have no idea what to say, he mumbled again, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He stared at her foolishly, dully, like a silly boy expecting to be scolded by his mother for his bad grades at secondary school. At the same moment, he felt his arms being tied and his head fainted. The wind blew into his face, carrying many colourful leaves that seemed to laugh at him. It appeared unlikely that his previous emotions had made him so stressed out before. It was a mixture of feelings. On one hand, Paleo was sweetly imprisoned by the falling leaves spinning around him, recalling his joy. On the other hand, his true sensations were captured by the magic voice coming from the girl sitting nearby as she stroked his hair. Now you are going to sleep, my little boy, she whispered, still caressing his hair as gently and tenderly as if she were his mother singing a lullaby. The moment felt unrealistically clear, as if all his neighborhood and the 4 trees were calling his attention more than his rational mind could grasp. He refused to believe that it possessed his entire body and mind, and the girl's blue eyes penetrated him deeply, as vast and open as a cloudless sky. At the next moment, he found himself lying on a cold surface with no guitar nearby. It was still full, but less colourful and bright. Something had definitely happened, but what? He felt completely disorientated and abandoned on this cold, promising yet disillusioned grass. Where is the girl? I didn't even call her name. Where am I? He stood up and stepped forward and looked around. Everything was nearly the same, but the trees were now bare. Who took my guitar? Was I drunk? These questions stormed through his mind, sharp, unexpected, and aggressive, yet the sky remained clear, just like the girl's eyes. He hurried out of the park, circling the area in an attempt to find his guitar. There were no traces that could more or less indicate its location. The people walking back and forth seemed unusual, more indifferent than preoccupied or stressed out as they usually appeared. Their faces looked almost emotionless. He reached a nearby bus stop and approached the first person he saw to ask for the time. Sorry, what time is it? I'm wondering if it's still too late or too early, he said, and he was stunned by what had just escaped his mouth. To his surprise, the people around him responded in a completely different language, one that sounded like a mixture of Arabic and Latin. As a result, his request went unanswered. He refused to believe it again. He asked different pedestrians the same question, but they all looked at him as if he had fallen from another planet, their faces blank and their language entirely unfamiliar. What's going on here? Who are all these people? He tried to scream, but his voice was drowned out by the crowd's noise, as if it were just a quiet bee buzzing in an ocean of lives. Suddenly, a very familiar sound reached his ears, soft guitar music. Its gentle notes spread around him, and the sound, like the waves of the sea, seemed to draw closer and closer to his presence. Is this the melody I used to play just a few hours ago? He wondered. He hurried toward the place where he had first heard the music. As he approached, he was stunned, mesmerized by what he saw. It was the girl he used to kiss in the park. She had taken his guitar and was playing his melody. He nearly leapt with joy. Finally, I found you. It's me. Don't you recognize me? He called out, hoping for an immediate response, but the girl kept playing, smiling, and kept an eye on some distant object, seemingly paying no attention to Paleo. I can't believe it. She's not recognizing me at all. His heart pounding like 1,000 little hammers echoing in his mind. Suddenly some people who looked like local police, speaking in their barbaric language, stepped in. They seized him, tied his hands, and he didn't even manage to say a word. The next thing he knew, he fainted. In the next moment, he found himself lying on the floor of a police officer's cell. The old blinking lamp swayed gently above his face, casting flickering shadows that danced across the cold, bare walls of the cell. His cellmates looked at him surprisingly while speaking in their unfamiliar language. He couldn't understand a single word, which made him feel completely confused and stressed out. Suddenly, one of his cellmates took a guitar and started playing. At that moment, Paleo felt like he was losing his mind. The same melody spread its waves throughout the cell. In some instances, he recognized his own guitar in the hands of that man. "Hey, you can't use my guitar. Give it back to me," he shouted, rushing toward the man in an attempt to reclaim the guitar. But at the same time, the entire cell erupted into a fight. Within seconds, his guitar shattered into pieces, and Paleo tried to choke his cellmate with the bronze string. The man was coughing uselessly, struggling to free himself from Paleo's grip. The next moment, two police officers entered the cell to calm everyone down. Paleo was taken outside and placed near the officer's desk. They planned a little investigation, he thought. But instead, the nurse entered the police office with a syringe in her hand, ready to give an injection. Her face was covered by a mask. The others followed her example and also covered their faces with medical masks. The nurse reached Paleo as quickly as she entered, sharply grabbing his arm and preparing to inject. Paleo tensed up, and at that moment he noticed the officer giving command to inject as sharply as if he was ordering to fire a gun. The nurse's warm breath was both seducing and intimidating, but her intentions made Paleo feel sober and calm quite soon. He pushed her away and ran toward the entrance. The entire police office was shaken by a huge bang, or so it seemed to him as he fled. The next moment, he felt himself falling into cold water with great splashes spreading around him. Hopefully, the coast was nearby and he reached it quite soon. Everything looked like a nightmare, and he refused to believe that it was really happening. But at least he was safe. Wringing out his wet clothes and trying to breathe steadily, he looked around, and what he saw made him tremble. All the people were walking back and forth, their faces covered by brilliant masks that illuminated in the harsh sunlight. Oh gosh, their foreheads bore numbers. Chapter 6. The senior was talking to Raj, a local famous priest who was in charge of all the churches in the city. Had they already accepted a new way of thinking where cats are able to confess their sins and dogs to preach from the altar's place? The senior adjusted his glasses, which slowly started slipping down his nose. "Yes, Your Majesty, they willingly accepted to be changed and obey their new religion, one without a god, instead of using their grey substances to think," Raj replied, taking a cup of fresh morning coffee and happily trying it. "Wow, it tastes great, a perfect mixture of faith, treachery and cowardice. One day our slaves will taste it too, if they are not." He suddenly interrupted himself and looked around as if there were spying drones nearby. "What's happened? Why have you kept quiet?" The senior asked, glancing around as well. "Do you think they could reprogram our drones and make them spy around my castle?" "No, Your Majesty. I've just suggested that it could be possible." if they were less stupid and frightened, if they acted against those who made them believe that black is equal to white and vice versa. He carefully moved back in his seat, maintaining a distance from his senior's wrath. The senior stood up, his gaze intimidating as he fixed it on Raj. You are not much better than them. Get out of here. Yes, and don't forget to bow to my cat. As Raj, like a beaten and blamed dog, backed toward the door, trying to escape his senior's wrath, the golden vase was thrown at him, striking him and making him cry out in pain. Yes, and don't forget to confess your sins to my cat, the senior added, smiling contemptuously. Meanwhile, Paleo tried to escape from that cold and abandoned place, but he had no idea how to do it. He rushed forward to one of those masked people, trying to clarify what epoch and place he was fantastically situated in. But his mind still refused to believe what was happening around him. Sorry, may I ask for your attention, please? What a day today. He addressed the first man standing next to him. The man seemed not to speak any human language, but merely looked at him and pointed to his forehead, which strangely illuminated with the figure 6. Are you crazy, man? Paleo was still seeking an appropriate way to ask questions, but felt that his patience was rapidly running out. The man pointed to his forehead once again, and then ran away. The sun was scorching, and even Paleo's wet clothes dried unexpectedly quickly. Suddenly, another man with a bronze string around his neck approached Paleo, and after seeing him, he jumped back immediately as if it was the scariest nightmare he'd ever seen. What's wrong with you? Paleo was shocked by such a reaction. And why does everybody wear these stupid masks? There weren't any cars, not even buses nearby. The sky seemed to be covered by a dome, which in turn made the atmosphere unbearably hot and stuffy. Simultaneously, some people were firing their guns and proclaiming actions that resembled a local revolution. People protesting to keep their rights to wear their masks, while those distant ones tried to remove their masks. The crazed individuals are desperately fighting for their right to remain masked. In a few moments, Paleo noticed a familiar girl looking like a nurse running around with her syringe, administering injections to people who seemed completely happy and relaxed during the process. What is going on here? Paleo was shocked and tried to find answers as soon as the questions flooded his mind. From time to time, the dome would open, revealing the crazy inhabitants of this unknown city. Its green eye shimmered, illuminating the entire neighborhood. They definitely must be mad, or maybe it's just a dream, and he's a prisoner of it. Paleo refused to believe this new reality he had encountered. But the dome was already closing, and it seemed that 200 human voices cried out for freedom. The next moment, Paleo made up his mind to slip away unless he was noticed and ejected. He still felt sober about the last occasions taking place in the police cell. He dashed forward to a nearby shelter where many volunteers had gathered, those who used to remove the illuminated mask from the faces of their victims. More than 200 masks had already been carefully brought inside the shelter. These volunteers looked tired, sweaty, and their skin was bleeding from all the tests they had to endure. Paleo joined them, asking for a glass of water, but nobody reached to him, surprisingly, except for one who approached him as soon as he entered this ruined shelter. They won't answer you, but I will. You know what? He surprisingly spoke in a language Paleo was able to understand. There will be no water unless the dome opens and it rains. His words sounded menacing and intimidating. They took all the water and provisions from us. At the next moment, Paleo became more confused and scared by everything that had happened in the past 2 hours of his life. Thank God, at least you're the one who speaks my language here, he sighed, hugging a stranger, feeling a strange connection to reality. Luigi was the name of the young man, as it later turned out, had escaped from the same cell as Paleo. He was strongly attached to his memories of the past and he seemed unable to escape from them. He used to be an engineer working on a brilliant project designed to connect his provincial city to its suburbs, but after he succeeded in completing it, he resigned without any explanation. He couldn't recall much more from his memory. All he knew was that he had fainted and was now here. Two more things began to tremble in Paleo's mind. He felt the aggression increasing within his muscles as Luigi's story reached its climax. When his new friend revealed the true reason behind all those people in the mask and their strong reluctance to remove them. These demons persistently made us accept their rules, said Luigi. First they deprived us of our freedom, now they want to take what's left of it. He spat on the ground and frowned, his face twisted with anger. The dome opened and the heavy rain began to pour down. Chapter 7. The police officer sat in his chair, twisting his arms nervously. A nurse stood in front of him, ready to give a report. So, you reached that place you mentioned? He asked, drumming his fingers on the table before falling silent. Is Her Majesty aware of his arrival? He sighed and scratched his groin. He felt incredibly excited in the presence of his beautiful nurse. Yes, after he escaped from here, he led himself to that secret door, and now he's faced the other one who knows enough about our plans. The nurse's voice sounded like raindrops pouring steadily onto the officer's face. Give me one more injection, the officer requested, and the nurse immediately complied. Afterward, he reached out and pulled her hand, unbuttoning her shirt. He then immersed himself in the comfort of her two full, sweet-smelling breasts. At the same time, in a world where Paleo was caught in heavy rain, strange female screams echoed through the air, blending with the storm's roar. The masked people grew more anxious, attempting to remove their masks to share a kiss, but they were unable to do so. It seemed as though a brief moment of enlightenment had touched their beings, illuminating their true selves, yet the darkest parts of their soul still remained dominant. Do you see that? Luigi screamed, pulling Paleo's hand and trying to get him out of there just as the entire building collapsed overhead. They barely managed to escape as a loud rumble erupted from behind. The place that just 2 seconds earlier had been a shelter was now crumbling under its own walls. Simultaneously, the female screams ceased, and the dome of the sky closed as swiftly as it had opened just moments earlier. The raindrops transformed instantly into a ripe harvest, and the masked inhabitants rushed forward to gather it for food. But they couldn't even remove their masks, which seemed to have grown firmly onto their faces. You see, they can't even eat until they receive another injection, one that always suppresses their physiological desire to keep on living. Luigi looked as if he was trying to silence that unbearable female voice, the one that had turned his life into an unending concentration camp. At the same time, an attractively dressed nurse approached the starving people and administered them an injection. Instantly, they lost consciousness and began to laugh uncontrollably, as if they had been released from a madhouse. "We have to get out of here until this nurse gets us seduced," Luigi said. They hurried up from that place, trying to save their own freedom. While the crowds of starving people were reaching out the injection like a manna from heaven, our friends were distancing themselves as far as possible. Finally, the sounds from behind vanished and they found themselves standing near the river. "So now what?" Paleo asked, trying to catch his breath after such a long and exhausting journey. Moments later, the river turned red, and our travellers had no idea how to cross its flaming waters. Suddenly, the nurse's loud laughter echoed across the horizon, reminiscent of a siren song that sailors might hear in fairy tales. "What are you waiting for, idiot?" shouted Luigi, glaring at Paleo, who seemed mesmerized by the beautiful, seductive voice growing louder and nearer. "Suit yourself, but I'm not staying here," Luigi declared, then leapt into the crimson water. No sooner had he submerged himself than he dissolved into it. Two drones spun around the castle, screaming a mantra-like chant. "The people of the world, wake up! The people of the world, wake up! Your sacred government is going to kill you. The churches are no longer places of prayer. They've become chaotic spaces where domestic animals roam more freely than their parishioners. You don't need to pay any fee to destroy this artificially created civilization that serves to your harm." Many more sentences followed, echoing through the air. The senior shivered in horror, searching desperately for a place to hide. His hands gradually transformed into demonic claws, and his entire body took on a sinister visage of Lucifer. Suddenly, the golden castle began to shake violently, collapsing and burying the senior's remaining belongings beneath the broken walls. Meanwhile, the streets filled with jubilant crowds, people dropping their chains, rejoicing openly as they celebrated their newfound freedom. Paleo stood frozen, shocked and unable to move or comprehend what had just happened. He lost his only friend in this new world. He tried to escape from the screaming prison, but his feet sank into the ground, rendering him unable to move. Meanwhile, the nurse was approaching him closer and closer until finally she embraced him with her seductive laugh. Paleo obediently remained on his feet, immovable. Within the next few seconds, he saw the dome opening and it began to rain heavily. The nurse unbuttoned his trousers, and in a matter of moments, He was inside her like a rushing river, their bodies moving as if the whole world were watching them. Her eyes pierced into his until he fainted. As he was falling into his dream, he managed to read the figures on her forehead. 2032. He also heard her enchanting voice saying, "You've escaped from our prison. You seem stronger than we expected. Our police officer is still looking for you to arrest you, but I got you first, I guess." Then he saw all the biblical prophets who were killed for their prophecies. They all seemed to address him as one. "Don't let this world break you. Your soul is the only thing that can defeat every demon within. Those who wear masks have lost themselves and have no faces anymore. Their daily bread is their fears, paralyzing their will. Leave them alone. You're not meant to save their lives, but never forget about God. That officer is Satan. If you call God's name, all their plans will be ruined in an instant." After saying this, the prophets disappeared. Paleo summoned his last strength and cried out, "Lord, have mercy on me. Lord, have mercy on me. Lord, have mercy on me." At the same moment, he saw the nurse screaming and transforming into a demonic shape. Chapter 8. Paleo opened his eyes. Surprisingly, there were no friends around to share his misery, nor were there any drones flying overhead. He shook the dust from his trousers and rose to his feet. A moment later, he noticed a girl watching him carefully, trying to catch every sound he made as if it wasn't something ordinary, but something fantastically underrated by the inhabitants of Earth. After her intense gaze, she approached his inspired silhouette captured by red, yellow, and orange leaves, swirling around this humble musician. He played so mournfully as if he were trying to surprise God itself. "Your music sounds so inspiring, as if it were the last melody on planet Earth. I'm serious," she added, casting a serious gaze that made his cheeks flush with colour. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate your kind words about my humble personality. I feel more connected with this universe now. His voice trembled slightly as if it was gently broken by the compliment. What is the year now? He asked, trying not to ruin the moment that connected him to the present. The girl smiled and looked at him with her blue eyes, as if trying to appear even more attractive. Now we are in 2033, she answered. Paleo sighed loudly. Thank God it was all a dream. What dream? The girl asked him, confused. Paleo smiled and continued playing the guitar happily. The girl sat nearby, listening intently to his inspiring melody.